The Weapons Used in the Trenches of World War I by Caleb Bisker. Background of trench warfare and World War I casualties. Trench warfare is a style of warfare that is fought on land. Lines of trenches would be dug in order to fit military personnel in order to fight the opposing military. This style of warfare is deemed as inefficient in World War I, as the trenches have never got pushed beyond the capacity needed to defeat the opposing military. Although inefficient, many died in the trenches of World War I. The exact number of deaths in the trenches is hard to tell, as many died of diseases. Mughal, 2011. The total number of military civilian casualties in World War I was around 40 million estimated. Weapons used in the trenches. Sniper rifles. These rifles were used for shooting at long ranges and would often have scopes that could be used to see enemies at longer distances. Machine guns. These style of weapons were used for multiple purposes. The most common purpose was to defend from each trench and prevent a push. Mortars. These were to be used for creating explosive blows to trenches. Trench sweepers were soldiers who would raid the enemy trenches. Trench sweeper weapons were to be used at close ranges, also used if a soldier was out of ammo in their rifle. Handheld devices, such as knives and clubs, to defend when all else fails. A sniper rifle's purpose. The purpose of the sniper rifles in the trenches have often the same purposes for why they are used today. These purposes include being able to fire high-caliber ammunition at further distances more accurately. Sniper rifles were used to shoot from trench to trench, and with a telescopic sight, they could see enemies much further. Beyond the accuracy that a sniper rifle possessed, the marksman shooting the rifle must be a good shot, as distances are different and the time of day could often cause issues. Even wind could cause the slightest of inaccuracy. According to Simkin, 1997, a common sniper purpose for the German army was that German snipers did not normally work from their own trenches. The main strategy was to creep out at dawn into no man's land and remain there all day, wearing camouflage clothing and using the cover of a fake tree. They waited for a British soldier to pop his head above the parapet. An example of this would be at the top right, as there's an example of a fake tree where a German sniper could easily see the enemy trenches. To the left of that picture is an example of a sniper shooting from a trench. Sniper rifles used. There are a multitude of sniper rifles used in the trenches of World War I. The most known are listed below. According to Higgins, an article from 2017, these rifles include the British Pattern 1914 Enfield, Germany's Mauser Gewehr 98, the American M1903 Springfield, the Ross rifle, and the M1891 Mosin Nagant. Some of these rifles were not intended to be sniper rifles, but with slight modifications they could become capability to become sniper rifles. Most modifications would include mounting scope rings and ultimately a scope to see and shoot at further distances. Examples of snipers are at the top right. The located at the top right of the screen is an American M1903 sniper rifle, used by the American Army. To the left of that picture is a British Pattern 1914 Enfield sniper rifle, used by, obviously, the British. Machine guns. Machine guns were used most dominantly in the trenches of World War I, as they would be able to defend enemy invasions from pushing beyond the accurate range of a machine gun. Most machine guns invented for the use of trench warfare had some sort of mounting bracket that they could be used to keep the weapon steadier and more accurate, as it would cause less overall feeling from recoil. These sorts of brackets would be mounted towards the ground with adjusting capabilities. Machine guns offered a much higher overall firing capacity, as they could fire hundreds of rounds per minute instead of weapons such as a semi-automatic firearm and a bolt-action firearm that were much slower. A semi-automatic firearm is used by individually pulling the trigger to fire off a round, and a bolt-action firearm is used by reloading the bolt using a bullet to insert into the chamber individually. Machine guns known to be used in the trenches. According to the Canadian War Museum, 2008, there were a few common machine guns used in the trenches of World War I. These include the Colt machine gun, the Vickers, Lewis light machine gun, MG08 Maxim, and etc. The Colt machine gun was known to be a good weapon, although it would often jam when firing at high rates. The Vickers was a heavier firearm than the Colt, but was more dependable, which is necessary in a war. Dependability is everything, especially considering that you are going to be shooting at an enemy, in return getting shot back at. The Lewis light machine gun was carried by a single soldier with a 47-round drum mag, but in the trenches a second person would be there to help with the ammunition. This is huge because for the first time, one of these larger style light machine guns could be individually fired, but obviously in the trenches it is nice to have a second hand reloading your firearm. The MG08 Maxim was used by the German army. Although dependable, it would require up to 5 soldiers. In return to the Lewis light machine gun, this added 4 more soldiers to the use, which would also in return mean that 4 less soldiers are firing at the enemy. So there is give, but there is also return. Located at the top right picture is a Vickers machine gun, and located to the left of that is a Lewis light machine gun used by, and it looks like it is being sighted in by the US Army. The purpose of mortars in the trenches. According to Knighton, an article written in 2018, a well-designed mortar is one of the least impressive looking weapons in the world. Little more than a pipe on a stand, it shows none of the complexity of other modern weapons. But this simplicity is the reason why it's so valuable. Knighton 2018 article states mortars were often the very first gunpowder weapons, lobbing projectiles and arcs to fall down upon the enemy, as catapults and trebuchets did. This meant that gunners could hit targets who were out of sight and protected by terrain, or defenses from the firepower of cannons and handguns. Firing explosive projectiles was obviously an adaptation which delivered a greater destructive force behind the enemy's defenses. This sense of power was essential to delivering blows in enemy trenches and can cause massive amounts of damage compared to normal artillery. Located at the top right and bottom right of the screen is an example, actually 2 examples of mortars that were used in World War I. Types of mortars used in the trenches. The Minenwerfer, also known as a mine thrower. This was a mortar fielded in various different sizes, designed to tackle France's concrete and steel frontier defenses. As a result, it was heavier and less portable than later mortars, with even the light version weighing in at over 200 pounds. The French deployed the battage nolles, heavy trench mortars that could respond in kind to the Minenwerfer. The Snokes mortar consisted of a smooth steel bore tube, a steel-based plate for it to be rested on, and a pair of legs to prop up the tube. A firing pin at the bottom of the tube was all that was needed for the firing mechanism. Rocket-shaped projectiles with stabilizing fins restore the accuracy lost to its lack of rifling. Germans recognized the limitations that were heavy weapons placed on them. They created the lightweight Granatenwerfer, grenade thrower, which fired a finned grenade much like the Stokes. Located at the top right is an example of the battage nolles mortar. Located at the bottom right of the screen is an example of the Granatenwerfer used by the German army, and located in the background you can see a glimpse of the Minenwerfer. The purpose of trench sweepers. Van der Linden, 2018 article. All armies use trench sweepers in order to clear captured enemy trenches. The French in Belgium called them nettoyeurs de tranchées, or trench cleaners. The French also called them zigeueurs, a term in argot, a common French dialect, denoting killers. These daring men were usually volunteers. The work was extremely hazardous and odds of survival were slim. Let me restate that. That is a very dangerous job. Firearms used by trench sweepers include pistols, shotguns, rifles. Examples of the trench sweeper firearms. After America ended the war, the John Browning designed Colt Model 1911 pistol that was used by trench sweepers was incorporated. The Belgians insisted on the reliability of the Browning designs and purchased a .32 caliber ACP Colt Model 1903 pistols as the ammunition was readily interchangeable with the FN Browning 1900 pistols already in service. Both pistols were designed by John Browning. The Doughboys changed trench sweeping by introducing the Winchester Model 1897 shotgun. It should be no surprise that this too was a John Browning design. Other pistols include the Savage 1907 pistols, Colt M1 911 pistols, and the Colt Army Special 38 revolvers. A submachine gun style weapon that was used was the MP-18. This was used by the German Army and was exceptional at clearing out trenches. There are two examples of firearms that were used in the trench by the trench jeepers located at the top right of the screen. At the very top right is an example of a 1911 handgun, and located to the left of that is a MP-18 German-style submachine gun. Handheld devices used and the purpose of them in the trenches. According to Brown in a 2018 article, when they went on trench raids, their rifles were of little use. Firing their weapons would alert the enemy. Bayonets fixed to rifles were unwieldy in the narrow trenches. They needed something silent but deadly weapons. Their weapons of choice were anything but modern. Trench clubs, trench knives, push daggers. McLaughlin of 2016 said mazes of trenches that ran for hundreds of miles were the setting of a lot of fighting. Trenches could be filled with gas, soaked, and muddy, or partially collapsed by artillery. This made for frantic close-quarters combat. In these confined situations of overwhelming charges of men, melee weapons became extremely effective. Located at the top right screen is an example of a trench club. There are many different examples, which is resembled in the bottom right picture of just a very minor effect of trench clubs that were used. Handheld devices. The trench club was built in many different formats, from wood to steel, to different shapes and styles. These clubs would be used primarily for raids within the trenches, and if hit by this trench club, it could cause serious pain and possibly even death. Trench knives. Just as the clubs, knives were different, having all different shapes and sizes. A common knife used by the United States, suggested by a JSTOR article, is the Model 1918 trench knife. According to a 1993 article, states, it and the earlier M1917 each had a 9-inch blue triangular blade designed for easy penetration of heavy uniforms and leather accoutrements. Push daggers were also used in many different shapes. They were used by punching into enemy soldiers while raiding trenches. Looking at the background of this slide, we can notice just a multitude of different handheld devices. On the bottom right, we can see a trench knife. Just above that, we can see push daggers, to homemade trench clubs located in the middle, to grenades, to even pistols in the back left. The picture located on the right is an example of a United States soldier holding his trench knife with brass knuckles attached to it. Here is my work cited. Nada J. Mugel is an author and historian that is very reputable. Weapons of the Land is an article from the Canadian War Museum, known to be a credible source. Malcolm Higgins, he is a reputable author for War History Online. John Simpkin is a history teacher who began teaching in 1978. Weapons on Land Machine Guns article is from the reputable, once again, Canadian War Museum. Andrew Knighton is a reputable author and freelance writer. Anthony van der Litten has worked over many decades in the historical fields as an author. Judy Brown is a well-known researcher spending many hours reviewing World War I. And the JSTOR database is a reputable source suggesting that author Whitcomb is a good writer. Thank you for listening to my presentation. My name is Caleb Isker. Have a good day.